You've kept me waiting, Alice. Have you never heard that punctuality's a virtue?
You and my dentist's assistant have much in common.
Cancelled video games. There's such a fascination around them, isn't there? A game you read about, watched trailers on, had anticipation for, only to never see the light of day. What's left is a feeling of great disappointment and a feeling of what if. Cancelled games come in different flavors. In some instances, early iterations of games end up as scraps after a development restart. Resident Evil 2 and 4 had different iterations cancelled that differ from their end release. Or games that never saw the light of day due to not living up to the developer's standards. It's hard to fathom now, but Blizzard canceled games like Warcraft Adventures and StarCraft Ghosts due to not meeting their standards. As we've seen more of as of late, canceled games due to the closing of studios. Microsoft killed off a large number of upcoming releases with the closure of several studios. For this video, I'm going to cover a canceled game that's a bit of a unique case, that being Alice Asylum. Instead of a game far into development before cancellation, it never even entered development. Its publisher EA decided to pass on the project, but series creator American McGee and his team put together a crowdfunded design bible to pitch to EA, one that lays out how the game would play and how the story would unfold. When I made my video on the American McGee Alice series back in the summer of 2022, the project was still up in the air. The announcement of the cancellation was in the spring of 2023. It's something I want to revisit and go into more detail of what could have been. So this video is going to be a bit different than what I usually do. This will be a more image-heavy video going through the design bible, which I will link to in the description and pinned comment. It's well worth a read, and as you'll see, some stunning artwork. It's staggering how much love and care emits from these pages, only for EA to pass on it.
At least the place I've landed is somewhat familiar.
About time too, Alice.
Before beginning, thanks to the fellow Boulder Punchers who support the channel through Patreon, YouTube memberships, or one-time donations. If you're interested in supporting the channel further, check the pinned comment or description for more info. As well, a thank you to today's sponsor, boot.dev. Learn back-end web development from start to finish using programming languages like Python, JavaScript, and C. I've used boot.dev for a refresher on Python. A younger Boulder Punch remembers the boredom he faced in that programming class he took in his university days. Boot.dev teaches you in such a way that you won't be bored. You'll write plenty of code and build real projects. This includes building a maze solver, a blog aggregator, and a web scraper. Boot.dev isn't one of those learn to code in a month services. The curriculum is around 12 months, and dives in deep into theory and practice. Learn from the best and develop best practices now instead of picking up bad habits that can cause issues down the line. Don't be one of those developers now. Who knows where this choice to learn back-end web development can take you? Perhaps your skills can get you hired at a place like Blizzard Entertainment on your own merits. You got there from learning through boot.dev instead of being a Nepo hire. Go to boot.dev and try out the courses for free, then use my code BoulderPunch, that's one word in all caps, for 25% off the first year if you choose the annual plan. Again, that's BoulderPunch, one word in all caps. And now on to the video. A bit about the design bible itself before we dive into its contents and how it came to be. American McGee had various talks with EA since the release of Madness Returns in 2011 for a third game, with varying degrees of success. But talks would progress as the years went on, with EA open for a pitch. But they weren't able to make a game prototype as a pitch. Why is that the case? American and his team were prohibited from booting up a game engine due to legal requirements and generating potential conflicts of interest surrounding the Alice game IP. What these legal requirements were and potential conflicts of interest were, I don't know. Easiest to shrug your shoulders and say, because EA? American McGee hasn't been an EA employee since the early 2000s, leaving not long after the release of the first game. He made Madness Returns with a studio he founded, Spicy Horse, in collaboration with EA. Spicy Horse shut down in 2016. Due to these constraints, American McGee and his small team made the choice of creating a design bible. To grow his team and receive further funding, as EA wouldn't provide it, they used Patreon to fund the design bible for Alice Asylum around late 2017. American McGee had used crowdfunding in the past for the series. He and his team used Kickstarter to crowdfund the 2 short films of Alice Otherlands. After several years of work, version 1.0 of the design bible for Alice Asylum released in February of 2023. This is the accumulation of all the work they did over the years. You can access past Patreon posts of early iterations of the work they did. For this video, I'm only focusing on what's in the design bible. In a high-level meeting American McGee had with a large development studio, the design bible received high praise. Out of the thousands of pitches and design documents they've received, the design bible for Alice Asylum was by far the best they've ever seen. And I could see why. It's a doozy at 414 pages. Lays out the game's foundation, the gameplay, the complete narrative. It's full of gorgeous artwork. If you're like me and you can't get enough of concept art for games, you'll be in heaven here. The team poured their heart and soul into it, which of course makes it so heartbreaking that the vision they have here will never make it to the screen. So, what did they have in mind for Alice Asylum? It was going to continue in line as Madness Returns for platforming and exploration, while pulling more from the first game on the combat side of things. A linear progression with optional content and secrets for the curious player. The art direction would continue in the style of Madness Returns, and for good reason. It's very much a timeless style. A perfect blend of strong art direction with tech. There's been few games since its release in 2011 that have such a distinct and memorable look. Some of the best usage of the Unreal 3 engine. And speaking of Unreal, they would use Unreal 5 for Alice Asylum. That said, it doesn't seem like the cutout animation style cutscenes from Madness Returns would be in Asylum. There's not a mention of it in the design bible, which is too bad because I really love their usage.
Best dive now, Admiral, or the sharks will have us for lunch.
On the music front, they created a handful of prototype tracks for some ideas of the mood that the music would take. They take heavy inspiration from the works of the composers for the prior two games. Now, in an ideal world, they would have Chris Vrenna back as the game's composer. He did the entire soundtrack for the first game and the song for Madness Returns. Madness Returns has a great soundtrack, but the first game, it's a top 10 for me as far as game soundtracks go. On the combat front, reading through the design bible, it was a bit vague how combat would handle. Would it be in line with the Zelda-like approach from Madness Returns, or more of the id design approach from the original? From what I read, it's a bit of a blending of the two. So what does it pull more from the original game? One being the larger weapon roster. Many weapons absent from Madness Returns re-entering the fold. Weapons like the playing cards, the croquet mallet, the ice wand. Many weapons from Madness Returns would also come back, along with a couple of new weapons. About a dozen weapons in total for Alice to find and use. Also returning from the first game would be alternate attacks. Some would handle the same, other weapons would switch around their primary and alternate attacks, some with new attacks altogether. Ranged weapons would use ammo. It's not like the willpower from the first game that shares across all weapons. You pick up ammo from the environment through exploration and defeating enemies. There would be an upgrade system. Alice would be able to upgrade weapons at Hatter's workshop. Asylum would also see return to a larger enemy roster. Some returning faces, many new ones. No more ruins, thankfully. They more than wore out their welcome with the repetitive nature in Madness Returns. And they also took the criticism on the lack of boss fights from Madness Returns to heart. A game that only had one boss fight at the game's end. It even had that fake out early on when you were getting ready for one. And boy, did they make up for it here. 16 bosses along the critical path. Alice would still have a dodge option, blocking, parries, so there would be elements of Madness Returns in its combat. It's hard to say without seeing gameplay what they had in mind for the blend between the two. I preferred the frantic id-style combat from the original, so I'm happy to see more elements return for Alice Asylum. Or at least would have returned for Alice Asylum. As well, that style has received a bit of a resurgence in recent years, especially on the indie front. Following in the vein of Madness Returns, Alice would get stylish with a wide variety of outfits. There would also be the addition of a dress rune system. Runes Alice could wear to enhance her abilities in various combinations. To find these, the player would have to engage in curiosity and explore off the beaten path to find hidden areas holding the runes. Alice would have to defeat a special enemy to unlock a rune. Rune abilities vary from improving the double jump, improving defense, to increasing the power of certain weapons like the Vorpal Blade. There would be 12 total runes, all upgradable, giving the player plenty of options and combinations at their fingertips. Before moving on to the narrative, there's one potential red flag that caught my eye while reading the design bible, that being the proposed length of Alice Asylum. They were aiming for an experience that's around 15 to 20 hours in length. While I enjoyed Madness Returns, I found the game's pacing and length to be its largest issue by a wide margin. It was a game that overstayed its welcome by a good 15% or so, where I was ready to move on to the next stage well before most stages ended. As great as it played, it still wore out its welcome by game's end. That said, there's far more at play here with what they proposed for Alice Asylum. The game jumps around more locations and levels. There's far more weapons, enemies, and bosses. The dress rune system as side quests seems like it would take up a fair chunk of time. As well, I tend to find developers overestimate a game's length, or at least exaggerate for marketing purposes. If the 15 to 20 hour range was for a completionist run to unlock everything, I could see that, but if it was 15 to 20 hours for the critical path, I could see that becoming an issue. From reading through the design bible, I'd find somewhere in the 12 to 15 hours would be a good sweet spot. I'd hate for the team to feel pressure to extend its runtime for the sake of it. This is a linear experience, not an open world title. One of the more egregious examples I've come across in recent years for a linear game was the Silent Hill 2 remake. My largest issue on the gameplay front was how it seemed to double its runtime of the original. The pacing was all over the place as a result. It's clear that they took the criticisms to heart in Madness Returns. Still, it's a possibility that pacing could become an issue of Alice Asylum and its execution. Another thing I want to bring up is the possibility of cut content. I mean, I guess this is all cut content in the sense that EA passed on making Alice Asylum a reality. But what I mean is, game development is an iterative process. Possible that had development ensued for Asylum, not everything in the design bible would make it. They may have cut down on weapons, levels, bosses, enemy types, story beats. There could be elements that seem great on the page, but they couldn't get onto the screen. Could be budget reasons, scheduling reasons. 1,000,001 different things could go wrong. So as great as it was to read through the design bible for what they had in mind, there was always the possibility various odds and ends wouldn't make it to the final product. With that, let's dive into the complete narrative experience of Alice Asylum. This is more of an overview of the major plot beats. If you're interested in more details like character dialogue, do give the design bible a read. As well, a warning for spoilers, not only for Asylum, but the prior two games. Alice Asylum begins with Alice awakening, all alone in a moonlit, snow-covered English garden. This is Alice from her younger years. We play her as a 13-year-old. This is the slumber, a manifestation of her childhood memories. It serves as a tutorial section for basic movement. Slumber is a recurring nightmare for Alice. In this nightmare, the moon is always watching her, hunting her. No matter what, she cannot escape the moon. A moon that sings an ominous lullaby, with Alice falling asleep under its spell. Running from the moon, she seeks safety inside her childhood home, the Liddell house. Sitting at the table is the rest of her family, burnt and twisted, wearing rabbit masks. Her mother, father, and older sister Lizzie. They scarf down on a black cake as they burn up, chanting to Alice, "It's all your fault." Alice wonders how long she must endure this endless torture, with a mysterious voice answering, "Until you have learned." An earthquake hits the Liddell home. Alice finds herself face to face with the caterpillar.
Why must I suffer?
Because your mind is fouled by self-deception. Even your fantasies have fragmented into tortured versions of themselves. You are racked with guilt because you survived, and you dread the prospect of a life alone.
He mentions Alice still has much to learn. Alice only wishes to escape from this place. Caterpillar tells Alice that it's a pity you show no interest in understanding your own shadow, Alice, for they have a keen interest in you. Caterpillar disappears, leaving Alice alone in front of an ornate looking glass. Facing her own reflection, a terrifying shadow creature stares back. The shadow creature tells Alice that, finally, "I found you." The shadow creature breaks through the looking glass, shattering the mirror into thousands of pieces, cutting Alice in the process. One large shard closes in on her heart. She reaches out to it to grab it, and it turns into the Vorpal Blade. A short combat tutorial would play out, with Alice fighting countless shadow manifests. It won't be long before Alice and the player become overrun by these shadows. But before that can happen, there is a lullaby heard in the distance. Blood-red tentacles emerge to grab Alice, finding herself back in the burning Liddell house, her childhood home. The moon looming overhead. The lullaby causes Alice to faint. She's pulled up into the sky towards the moon as the scene fades to black and the prelude ends. Alice opens her eyes to see Mock Turtle, singing. He ejects her from her bed with a giant lever. A white rabbit doll beckons Alice to follow. This is the Carnival of Fools. There's a sign that says 4,565 days of show. That works out to about 12 and a half years. With the timeline, this would be the amount of time since the fire incident. Following the rabbit doll, this stretch would serve as a further tutorial for movement. Throughout, there would be characters singing, Alice included, a musical number as we go through the Carnival of Fools. I remember making note of singing sections when I reviewed Madness Returns a few years back. There was one stretch during the Diluted Depths where I thought the characters would burst out into song but never did. Well, it looks like Asylum would make up for that. A carnival would be a good place for this to play out. I have to wonder how elaborate it'd be compared to something like the musical bit from Alan Wake 2. Alice seeks to escape from the circus, but cannot. The others tell her to give up and enjoy the show. Overhead, the moon watches over. The rabbit doll leads Alice to the fortune teller's tent. Alice has never come across this tent before, but the fortune teller states it's always been here. In the past, she's never bothered to notice it. The tent is full of odds and ends, and many globes in decaying condition. Alice knocks over a globe, which smashes on the floor. The fortune teller, with a hand motion, reforms the shattered globe, the few cracked pieces in tow. Fortune teller helps Alice in opening her eyes. Gazing into the crystal ball, the fortune teller pries open Alice's third eye as she returns to the slumber realm. These slumber realm sections serve as story interludes, similar to how the London sections in Madness Returns acted as interludes. With what happened with the fortune teller, Alice now unlocks the Mind's Eye ability. This will unlock basic wayfinding and towards mission objectives. It's a bit vague how this ability would work with what's written about it in the design Bible. I'm guessing it would be like how shrinking in Madness Returns would reveal invisible platforms or marks in the environment. Alice would use Mind's Eye to navigate through the slumber realm to find Caterpillar once again. He tells Alice that now she may be ready to see things that weren't there before. He tells Alice she must deal with the shadow that emerged from the mirror the last time she was in the slumber realm. The shadow fears Alice more than she fears the shadow. Caterpillar blows a cloud of smoke, with Alice emerging in the front yard of her family home. Alice heads inside with a voice whispering that it was all her fault. In her current state, Alice does not recall the truth of what happened that night, but she does have vague recollections. She would find herself in the endless looping corridor as the house begins to burn. She hears the cries of her family, only to find herself in her own bedroom. Alice once again is unable to save her family. Scene cuts to Rutledge Asylum. Alice once again hearing whispers that it was her fault. Thrashing around as the orderlies try to subdue her, flashes of the shadow merges with Alice's face. The scene dissolves with Alice returning to Caterpillar. The shadow is a part of her, a monster that lives within us all, but only a few can face, much less embrace. He tells Alice to remove the mask and to face her darkness, to face her shadow. The idea of the shadow self is an age-old concept in storytelling, stretching back to the days of mythology and beyond. I'm sure it came up in stories told when we were still grunting and painting murals on cave walls. In more recent years, the psychologist Carl Jung brought more light, no pun intended, on the subject. The shadow is the darker side one tries to repress or deny, a formidable antagonist for Alice with all that she's gone through and continues to go through. The scene shifts once again, with Alice locked up in Rutledge Asylum. Her eyes turn black as the scene zooms into the abyss of her eyes, the sound of circus music fading back in. Alice awakens back in the fortune teller's tent, but no fortune teller, only her and the rabbit doll. Shattered globes lay across the tent. With Mind's Eye, Alice now sees a different path and seeks escape from the circus. The musical elements from earlier continue. Alice finds herself surrounded by circus performers demanding that she's doing it wrong, that's all her fault. To sing, to dance, to say the right lines. Letting out a scream, Alice unlocks Hysteria, a returning ability from Madness Returns. One you could use when Alice is near death. The circus illusion begins to crumble. Enemies break down into mechanical automations as Alice destroys them. This also marks the first encounter with a manipulator, an enemy capable of mimicking other characters. Alice enters the Big Top, a large tent. Her appearance would turn to one of a clown as the audience jeers her. Arriving in a balloon are the ringmasters, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Demanding to know why she's a prisoner of the circus, Tweedledee and Dum tell Alice that they are but the jailers. It's the Queen who wishes to keep Alice here. This serves as the first of many boss fights of Alice Asylum. After defeating the two, Alice acquires two new weapons, the Troublemaker and the Jack Bomb, a returning weapon. The Troublemaker, a new weapon to the series roster, has a twofold purpose. For combat, the player could use it for close-range AoE attacks. For platforming and exploration, it serves as a grappling hook. The Jack Bomb is a returning weapon last seen in the first game. It would handle as a bit of a mixture between the Jack Bomb and the Clockwork Bomb from Madness Returns. With the primary attack, Alice would lob them, exploding on impact. Its alternative attack handles more like the Clockwork Bomb from Madness Returns. Place them and detonate them on command. Use it for switch activation or draw enemies to the bomb. Alice climbs into the balloon that Tweedledee and Tweedledum used to enter with Rabbit in tow. She flies above the circus, at last escaping. And now she finds herself face to face with the moon. The balloon enters the mouth of the moon. Thought to be a living thing, the moon is actually a mechanical construct, courtesy of Hatter Industries. Alice would then explore the insides to find a way of controlling the moon to take her to the Queen's domain. Alice would come across Mock Turtle once again, pleading for her to stop.
You don't respect the suffering of others. Go ask your questions and smart remarks to Caterpillar.
Live in this comfortable lie. Alice refuses and Mock Turtle transforms. This was a manipulator, not the real Mock Turtle. This serves as the game's second boss. With the fight over, the moon hurtles toward the ground. Before falling to her death, Alice grows large enough until she finds herself sitting in a forest. In a pond is Mock Turtle, swimming. On the back of the shell is a tiny version of the circus Alice escaped from. Within the remains of the moon is a clockwork heart, one that still functions. She gives the heart to her rabbit doll to hold onto. It seems insignificant now, but it is a key item for later. In the distance is the Queen's Castle, as the first level wraps up. Moving on to level 2. While level 1 was 3 acts, level 2 is 8. It's a bit hard to get a gauge of how long some of these acts would be. It's not like they would all be of equal length. Most notable when we get near the game's end stretch, where some levels become far shorter. They may only consist of cutscenes, a tiny bit of exploration, and a boss fight. Alice finds herself in the Queen's Rose Garden and its hedge maze. This marks the first appearance of Card Guards, one of the signature enemies of the series. Alice would come across the guards fighting Alice's shadow from the mirror. Disappearing, the shadow leaves behind a mass of black tentacles, known as the Chaos, consuming the guards. This is the introduction to the Chaos, the primary enemy of Alice Asylum. The Chaos will inflict NPCs for Alice to fight with. Here, Alice would form a temporary alliance with the Card Guards to deal with those infected by the Chaos. Entering the Fortress of Sorrow, Alice would come across the Knave, who has quite the unsettling appearance. Dressed in regal attire, he has a medical apparatus attached to his head. Filling the trickster trope, Alice isn't sure what to make of the Knave. He tells Alice he's seen her before, to which she thinks he is lying. It's not clear if he is. The Knave tells Alice that something is different this time from before. The Chaos, the blade she carries. Despite this, it always ends the same. The Queen will capture Alice and return her to the circus, and the Queen has the Knave beheaded. In her anger, Alice throws her knife at the Knave, who dodges. This would smash a case of a hobby horse, which Alice acquires as a weapon. A returning weapon from Madness returns, dealing heavy melee damage and handling in a similar manner. Its alternate attack would be a chargeable heavy stun that could destroy shields and armor of certain enemies. Before vanishing, the Knave tells Alice that the only way to the Queen's Castle is through the courthouse to receive judgment, something he advises against her doing due to her guilt, but Alice decides to push on. Arriving at the courthouse steps, Alice would once again run into the Knave. If found innocent, Alice will continue her journey to the Queen, else she'll be sentenced to croak for eternity. The Knave loves to pop out of nowhere before vanishing as Alice looks away like a Batman figure. The inside of the courthouse is a mess, chess pieces all scurrying about, before all turning to her, falling silent, before saying trial in unison. Going through several trials involving puzzles, navigation, and combat, the court still finds Alice guilty, giving her a sentence to croak for eternity. In her anger, Alice unlocks a new gameplay mechanic, the Inferno state. Whereas Hysteria mode activates once Alice's health drops below a certain threshold, the player can activate Inferno once the Inferno bar fills up. The bar will fill up by chaining together combos and defeating enemies in a short time frame. Once activated, Alice sends out a fire-based AoE and remains in the Inferno state for a limited time in which she receives damage buffs. This does make up for one of the shortcomings of Madness Returns. If you played well, you have little usage of Hysteria throughout. Combat wasn't too difficult, so if you wanted to activate Hysteria, you had to let your foes hit you. Now, you can still use Hysteria mode here in Alice Asylum, but also you have the addition of Inferno mode, which acts as an incentive and a reward for skilled combat. She attacks the chess pieces, only to find them infected with chaos. This act would end off with a boss fight against the Blind Judge. Upon defeating the Blind Judge, Alice hears a slow clap from behind her. Alice turns to once again see her shadow self-applauding her. With a snap of the shadow's fingers, the floor collapses beneath Alice's feet, falling into darkness. Here we have another intermission on the slumber. Alice finds herself in 1863 at the hospital at the age of 11 in an out-of-body experience. Her younger self here is the Child of Fire. Making her way through the hospital in this out-of-body experience, Alice would come across Bumby and Radcliffe. They seem familiar to her, but she can't quite put her finger on who they are. The two have a discussion about Alice, with Radcliffe shaking his black notebook at Bumby. Do keep this notebook in mind. For a refresher on Radcliffe and Bumby, these two were characters introduced in Madness Returns. Radcliffe was the Liddell family lawyer and shows a great personal interest in Alice's inheritance. After all, Alice came from a wealthy family, with her father the Dean of Oxford. And then there's Dr. Angus Bumby. He was a student of Alice's father, common household guest for tea. He took a liking for Alice's older sister Lizzie, but Lizzie thought little of him.
Claimed I'd stolen his heart. Trifling with his affections. Creepy sod. Touching me. Told Papa to never invite him to tea again.
This longing grew into an obsession. One evening, he broke into the Liddell home, assaulted and murdered Lizzie, and locked the door to her room. Alice witnessed the break-in, but at her young age convinced herself it was a centaur. Bumby set the house on fire to cover up his tracks, leaving Alice the sole survivor. Years later, after leaving Rutledge Asylum, Alice would be a patient of Bumby's, now a psychiatrist. Using hypnotherapy and using Lizzie's bedroom key to hypnotize his patients, he was trying to help Alice forget the memories of the fire. This, of course, would benefit him to cover up his crime from years past. As Madness Returns progressed, Alice would come to learn it was Bumby who started the fire and killed her family. As well, Bumby used his hypnotherapy on children to make them forget their memories and selling them off. Bumby was a truly heinous man, for what he did to Alice and her family and the trafficking of children, which makes Alice's final stand against him one of the more satisfying deaths to an antagonist I've come across in the game. We cut ahead to a scene with Alice alone in her cell at Rutledge Asylum, two halves of her psyche in conflict with one another, one blaming her for what happened, that was all her fault. Surrounded by orderlies and nurses, the shadow self of Alice splits from the child self. In this moment in the past, the child self of Alice is sent to the circus, deep within the snow globe. Shadow Alice becomes the dominant personality. They are one and the same, two halves that form the whole. The gentle, hopeful side of Alice was severed, left behind in darkness. Back in the present, Alice descends into a group of Wonderland inmates, all with croquet mallets. They've surrounded a fish person who ends up dead via snapped spine due to a rook chess piece. Someone hands Alice a croquet mallet as the match begins. They've been at this forever. This marks the return of the croquet mallet as a weapon, when absent in Madness Returns. It would handle a bit different compared to the first game. There, its primary attack was a melee strike, its alternative attack launching an electrified ball. In Alice Asylum, its primary attack would launch an electrified ball instead of a melee strike. Its alternate attack, after a longer windup, would replace the ball with a hedgehog shooting quills at foes. Wishing to escape, Alice plays along. This section would involve racing combat and, according to the design bible, surreal nonsense. What surreal nonsense is? Your guess is as good as mine. No one ever seems to win this game that they've been playing. The reason being that the other players always have the chance to thwart the escape of their fellow inmates. If they could only work together, they could escape one by one, but they refuse to. Adding further stakes and tension, chaos is now spilling across the area. Winning the game, Alice receives a pardon and begins to float away. As she floats away, she tells those below that they could escape if they only work together. The others look up for but a moment before resuming hitting each other with mallets until the chaos consumes them. Alice floats back to the Queen's domain with the knave waiting for her. He tells Alice to turn back, that the Queen is too powerful for her. Unwavering, Alice continues on. She would follow her rabbit doll through floating islands full of the Queen's forces, fighting with those corrupted by chaos. She'd make it just in time as the card guards raised the drawbridge, before further chaos could enter the castle. Once inside, Alice would come across card guards on their dying breaths. The chaos is too much to deal with. You know, with all this talk about chaos, Alice should team up with Jack from Strangers of Paradise to deal with it.
My mission is to kill chaos. That's all I know.
Heading through the castle, Alice would come across new enemy types in the Chaos Realm, and a returning face from Madness Returns, the Executioner. As he was in Madness Returns, he is invincible. Alice dealt with him there by eating a cake to grow in size before stomping on him in one of the game's more notable scenes. Alice Asylum takes a different approach. Before we deal with him once and for all, there would be a mixture of platforming and stealth. Once cornered, a boss fight would ensure, with Alice destroying the floor with both falling into a near-endless abyss. As she uses her dress to float to safety, the Executioner explodes into pieces as he hits the ground. Alice finds herself in the castle's dungeon with, once again, the knave waiting. He tells Alice that she's never been this far before, that her actions defy what his cards say, that she's defying fate. The dungeon consists of architecture that defies logic, leading to some gravity-defying platforming to navigate. Alice would come across many prisoners in her journey through the dungeon, various inhabitants of Wonderland, all faceless, shambling representations of her family, the jailers being many enemies of chaos. Making her way upward, Alice would come across a mirror, looking back at her as a younger version of herself, the one we saw in her flashback in the hospital, the Child of Fire. She would step out of the mirror and toward Alice. The Child of Fire is the focus of Alice's eternal anger. Alice's shadow would interrupt their conversation, piercing the heart of Alice's younger self. The Child of Fire turns into a creature of chaos. The shadow vanishes, leaving Alice to fight the corrupted Child of Fire in a boss fight. The fight ends with Rabbit Doll stepping in front of Alice and taking a hit from the Child of Fire. Chaos begins to consume the rabbit. Red tentacles emerge, picking up Alice and Rabbit, and take them upwards, leaving the Child of Fire behind. They arrive in the throne room with the Queen of Hearts and the Knave waiting.
Off with her head.
Alice seeks her release, but the Queen of Hearts tells Alice that they're all here because of her. She refuses to learn or to grow, and that she is in danger. She's kept in the circus for her own good. It's a sanctuary to protect her from her own darkness. With the Queen's Guard set to behead the Knave, he escapes from their grasp and frees Alice. They together would fight the Queens of Heart in the game's 6th boss fight. Boy, they're sure making up for the lack of boss fights from Madness Returns, aren't they? In victory, Alice would use her Vorpal Blade to decapitate the Queen. Alice tends to her Rabbit Doll, dying as chaos consumes him. A clockwork heart that we collected after the moon crash falls from its pocket. The Knave recognizes it from his dreams and holds it towards Rabbit's chest. The clockwork heart falls into place, healing Rabbit back to normal. Alice would pick Rabbit up and spin around with him. The throne room would fade away as Alice finds herself once again in slumber for another short intermission. The scene transitions to a younger Alice at home, spinning around the living room with her older sister Lizzie. In her dizziness, Alice knocks over a tea set and cuts herself. Lizzie would care to Alice as their mother Leanne enters, sending them to their rooms as punishment. Along the way, the sisters would talk to their father, Arthur. There's a time and a place for games, and that time may be cut short as you grow. You'll know when the time is right. The house would dissolve into a cathedral, the funeral of Alice's family. Above the 3 caskets is Caterpillar, as whispers blaming Alice rise as she heads towards the caskets. They burst into flame, with the screams of Lizzie, Leanne, and Arthur heard. The church would flash back further into Alice's past, this time her baptism. As she touches the water, the scene cuts to black and we return to the throne room of the Queen. Turns out the Queen here was a manipulator, a mechanical concoction. In his anger, the Knave checks to see if he himself is a manipulator, and he is. The Knave tells Alice they're an invention of the Hatter, who she could reach through the Hall of Doors. The Knave would give Alice a deck of playing cards, another returning weapon from the first game. Its primary attack would act in the same way, but would have a different alternate attack. In Asylum, Alice would throw them in a 180-degree arc in front of her, great for crowd control. Following the Knave, Alice finds herself in the Hall of Doors, many locked, yet many open. The Hall of Doors would serve as a hub, a means to jump around to other areas of Wonderland. Stepping through a door, Alice sees the shadow appear behind the Knave. As she cries out, the door slams shut. The shadow tears the Knave to pieces. When she reopens the door, there is nothing there. This closes off the 2nd level. Level 3 would be shorter. There's 3 acts here like the first level as opposed to 8 in level 2. Again, it's a bit hard to get a gauge of the variance in length across acts. But stepping through the door, Alice finds herself in Hatter's domain. Heading toward Hatter's workshop, Alice spots gleaming eyes and a grin watching her from the shadows. Who else but Cheshire Cat, taking a bit longer to pop up compared to the past 2 games in the series. Reading through the design Bible, beyond Alice's dialogue, I could hear Roger Jackson's voice clear as day while reading through Cheshire's dialogue.
Abandon that hope. A new law reigns in this wonderland, Alice. It's very rough justice all round. We're at risk here. You be on your guard.
Alice has a vague familiarity with Cheshire. He tells Alice her journey has been less of an adventure and more of a trial by fire, that she must trust her instincts before fading away. Like the prior 2 games, Alice can summon Cheshire to provide hints and lore to Alice. It's unclear if it would be like Madness Returns, where you could only summon him at certain points, compared to the first game where you could summon him at will.
What lies beneath this patina of civility? Something wicked, I'll wager.
What is sought is most often found, if it is truly sought.
Act 2 finds Alice arriving at the lair of Cheshire Cat. Alice undertakes navigation puzzles with the sky full of astrological symbols. She would come across a compass, which reveals unseen hints in the environment. This becomes an unlocked ability. allowing her to see secrets and hidden paths. The compass not only works as a guide, but it's a representation of her inner compass. She must learn to trust herself. The environment shifts around to make the journey to Hatter's laboratory more direct. Along the way, Alice would fight against many inventions made from the Hatter, such as teapots. When she reaches the door of the Hatter's lab, she springs a trap. A clockwork hand snatches Alice, leaving Cheshire behind. The hand would drop Alice off face to face with the Hatter in his workshop.
I feel like a new man, or whatever I am. I feel like an unsprung spring, like an uncorroded gear, like an untarnished bit of metal that sticks in your eye.
Hatter gives little thought to Alice, fiddling around his workbench, telling her she's busy. Instead of fighting, they have a long conversation with much exposition. Hatter has a mechanical puppet show ready for explanations. The Queen made the circus to keep Alice's curiosity in check, to keep her as far away from the chaos as possible. At the moment, Alice is not strong enough to defeat her shadow self. The Hatter has conducted many experiments to find a means of defeating the chaos. This includes using prima materia. Prima materia, or first matter, comes from the world of alchemy. It's the starting material for the alchemical magnus opus for the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, from which all things originate. In his experiments, Hatter had his work and home destroyed by chaos. He lost the prima materia. But we have found one piece of the puzzle to help deal with chaos, that being the clockwork heart that saved Rabbit's life. The heart can withstand chaos. There are two remaining pieces, the eyes and the brain. The eyes can focus, dilute, and channel chaos. The brain can control it. So now we have a concrete goal. Find the eyes and the brain and bring them back to Hatter. It's our only hope in being able to face Alice's shadow and the chaos. Before setting us on our way and capping off this level, the Hatter gives Alice a new weapon, Hatter's Table Setter. This weapon would handle like the teapot cannon from Madness Returns with an amusing addition. Its alternate attack would turn the table setter into a chainsaw. The thought of Alice running around with a makeshift chainsaw mowing down enemies like she's Marcus Phoenix from Gears of War is an amusing one. Returning to the Hall of Doors, Alice's inner compass guides her to the door towards the eye, but it's a tiny door laying at her feet. As she approaches, she shrinks down and heads through. Before the door closes, a black stream of the shadow follows her and Rabbit as level 3 ends. For level 4, Alice finds herself at the entrance of the Mines of Memory. The infernal train makes a return from Madness Returns as she finds herself at the Abyssal Station. Greeting her behind one of the windows is March Hare, another returning character, along with Dormouse.
Abandon false hope. Forget the past. The damage is done. Let the madness begin. Resume the folly.
They tried to prevent her from leaving by throwing up various traps. Alice would use the inner compass to head in the direction of the eyes. Heading deeper into the mine, she comes across heavy machinery and termite drones carrying materials here and there. These are where Alice's memories go for recycling that feeds into her imagination. Making her way through past memories, the way forward becomes clear as she processes each memory. As Alice heads deeper into the mines, she comes across memories of the shadow, memories unfamiliar to her. She steps into these unknown memories to find the way forward. Entering this first dark memory, Alice sees Bumby and Radcliffe in discussion. Their appearance is broken, bathed in darkness, out of proportion with no eyes, only black recesses where their eyes should be. Alice's shadow does not want her to process these memories. If she processes them, it allows her growth beyond the trauma. Bumby and Radcliffe are in discussion, saying insanity is the best option. Radcliffe tells Bumby to keep their clients intact, contain Alice's mind. With Alice as his ward, the Liddell estate is in the grasp of Radcliffe, a very generous one. Alice finds herself in the asylum, going through the routines of her day-to-day. The shadow enters her cell, screaming at Alice to get out. The shadow would pull her into another memory. She is now talking to Dr. Bumby in a counseling session, telling her the cost of forgetting is high, evoking back to the beginning of Madness Returns. Radcliffe makes count as bleeding dolls find themselves whisked away by puppet hands. The infernal train bursts through the wall as Alice plunges further into darkness. She finds herself face to face once again with Bumby, this time in the form of the doll maker that we saw at the end of Madness Returns. Above her hang skewered dolls on hooks and nails. Bumby gives some insight into his past. His own mother was mad. He learned to wipe the mind of others, to help them forget their memories to make them clean. He has devoted his life to the eradication of true chaos. In a game series full of disturbing themes and imagery, what happens next is one of the more disturbing. Bumby pulls out a pocket watch in an odd shape that's frozen in time. Alice realizes that trapped within the glass is her older sister Lizzie. She's screaming to get out. A boss fight against Bumby in his dollmaker form would happen, with Bumby using the pocket watch as a weapon. Upon defeating the dollmaker, Bumby would consume Alice, finding herself at a London train station. This is the ending scene of Madness Returns. Here Alice pushes Bumby in front of a moving train, killing him. As the train strikes Bumby, the scene freezes. Zooming into Alice's eyes, a snow globe falls and cracks on the floor. Wisps of the shadow seep in. This is the moment where the chaos enters the world of the snow globe, where the shadow and chaos enter the circus where part of Alice has been trapped in for so long. Alice finds herself returning to the slumber for another chat with Caterpillar. It was Alice's shadow that killed Bumby, sparing this side of her the pain. Upon killing Bumby, his darkness transferred to her, a darkness that will come to consume her in due time unless stopped. It was the shadow side of Alice keeping her safe. Now it's her turn. This side of Alice is her reason, her kindness. She's been under protection for this long until she was needed most. That time is now. The scene with Caterpillar fades away as we return to the mines. Alice would find the teapot cannon in this act, which struck me as a bit odd. We received Hatter's table setter not that long before and does have some overlap. Its alternate attack allows for Alice to pour boiling hot tea on the ground as she walks, burning up her foes who step on it. Continuing through the mines, Alice realizes it's in a terrible condition. Processing of memories have stalled, left behind to feed the shadow. After defeating a boss, the mechanical memory, Alice finds herself pulled into the memory recycling system for another encounter with Caterpillar. She finds herself at the end of Madness Returns after killing Bumby, wandering the streets of London that merge with Wonderland or Lunderland. Passersby stop and stare at Alice. They don't speak, but she could hear their thoughts. Cracks appear in the wall. Mushrooms and sprouts wither and die. The Lunderland turns into rot as darkness spreads. Day turns to night as she arrives at the Houndstitch Home for Wayward Youth, run by Bumby and where Alice lived after leaving the asylum. She sees Radcliffe surrounded by orphans talking to police. With his little black book in hand, Radcliffe yells at the police to arrest Alice for the murder of Bumby. They will do their investigation first before doing any arresting. Radcliffe banishes her from the home for wayward children, but in his anger he lets something slip, referring to the children as products before correcting himself. Breaking down, Alice hears his inner thoughts. She will never lay a finger on her family's estate as long as he is alive. For a brief moment, Radcliffe takes on a demonic form amongst fire, pocketing money as bloody coins fall from his fingers. Alice realizes that her shadow wants to kill Radcliffe. In doing so, the transformation will be complete, and the darkness will consume her in full. Alice wakes from the slumber, finding herself before the Tree of Memory. At the base of the tree is a small pond. Inside are the eyes that she's been seeking. With the memory tree repaired, all kinds of memories flood Alice. Those that she knows and those of the shadow, who now stares back at her in the reflection of the pond. Placing a finger on the reflection, the pond ripples. She only sees her own reflection staring back, the shadow's now gone. Alice spots a nearby door, returning to the Hall of Doors, ending off level 4. Throughout the design Bible, there are some pre-production design notes from the development team. For the eyes, the heart, the brain, they're there to represent the self and processing trauma. The heart for the pain of those she loved and lost. The eyes to see the truth and face her in her darkness. The brain for processing the information of her grief. Through the Hall of Doors, Alice steps into the Vale of Tears to begin level 5. Cheshire Cat stops by for a chat with Alice, who's processing what's been happening. Despite the horrible things her shadow has done, her actions seem justified. It's up to Alice if she wants to challenge her shadow, or to help her burn things to the ground, both from a literal and figurative standpoint. This section would involve platform puzzles shaped by the environment. Alice carries a bubble of influence. Time resumes in its proximity, but freezes as she steps outside it. Alice would once again come across Mock Turtle, frozen in time and place until Alice approaches. To restore the flow of time, Mock Turtle suggests we find the Duchess. With Mock Turtle as a raft, Alice would float down the river to find the Duchess. We would see the shadow in the distance, tearing a pigman apart, crying as she does so. Mock Turtle panics as the shadow approaches, flinging Alice away downstream. She looks back to see her shadow consuming Mock Turtle. Awakening downstream, Alice finds herself at the Duchess's cottage. There are pig effigies scattered about amongst graves and open coffins. Out walks the Duchess in a mourning veil. Unlike Madness Returns, she's not too happy to see Alice, is more in the mood for a fight like she was in the first game.
You may approach.
Why would I do that? You want to eat me?
Yes, well, you taught me manners, and I've lost my taste for mad women. Strictly a porcine diet for me. Everything's better with bacon, don't you agree? Of course you do.
Come closer, my little chick. Properly seasoned, you'd make a handsome dish.
I'm not edible.
Not a full meal, certainly, but a light snack, I think.
She believes Alice is here to finish off the rest of her pigs. During this boss fight, the pigs would help the Duchess, and after defeating her, the Duchess begins to cry, in mourning for the loss of her children. Recognizing that Alice fights with courage and not a blind fury, the Duchess discusses the importance of crying. Tears are restorative. To restore the flow of time, Alice needs to collect tears from the purest source and bring them to the Duchess. Following her inner compass, Alice comes across a statue of her weeping. These are the purest tears in the Vale of Tears. Alice herself begins to cry, missing her family, as she drifts back to the slumber realm for an intermission. She awakens to find herself in the streets of London, Caterpillar by her side. She's watching a memory of herself sneaking into the office of Radcliffe. This is after being banished from the Houndstitch Home for Wayward Youth. In his office, the Alice in her memory comes across an object cloaked in darkness. As she reaches out for it, a wave of chaos emerges. It engulfs the memory of Alice. As the scene fades out, Caterpillar tells Alice that her shadow was not ready for what she's found, and neither is she. Not yet. With the tears in hand, Alice returns to the Duchess. Time begins to once again flow in the Vale. There is a fortress at the center of the Vale containing the brain, the third and final piece that Hatter sent us to find. Before we leave, the Duchess gives Alice the pepper grinder, a returning weapon from Madness Returns. It would also have the addition of a smoke screen with its alternate attack. This would disorient enemies, causing them to lose track of Alice. Making her way through the fortress, Alice comes face to face with Bill McGill the Lizard, a character we haven't seen since the first game.
I'll have the leeches in to handle this mess.
He's guarding the brain and will have to fight him to get it. He uses the brain against Alice in this boss fight as he takes control of horrible hallucinations. He summons nightmares to attack Alice. To win the fight, Alice must sever Bill's connection to the brain. After doing so, Bill returns to his old ways, unaware of the fight they had. He hands the brain over to Alice without a thought, no pun intended. Now in possession of all three pieces, the eyes, the heart, and the brain, Alice returns to Hatter's workshop. During Alice's time away, Hatter made a new weapon for her. One returning from the first game, the Ice Wand. Its primary attack is a combination to how the Ice Wand worked in the first game. It will freeze enemies solid, which you could push around to use as a platform, use for cover, or shatter with another weapon. Its alternate attack turns the Ice Wand into a bow. While it has a long windup, it can inflict heavy damage and from a distance. Now in possession of the heart, the eyes, and the brain, Alice is ready to face her shadow. Through the Hall of Doors, she steps through a new door, moving on to the game's 6th level. She's now in a flooded, burning London. Some buildings float, others provide platforms amongst the flooded city. Along the way, Alice would deal with London's citizens, now corrupted by the chaos. Navigating through the city, Alice would come across another returning face from Madness Returns, the Carpenter.
Most vexatious, no doubt, will address that monstrosity directly. That's to say, eventually. Now, let's intermediate more important matters. Due to a logisterical foul-up, some of the show's requisites need to be gathered.
The Carpenter sends her off to unseal the valves to drain the water levels. This would take Alice back to the home for wayward children. The lower levels flooded, the upper level on fire. Spirits of the children continue to play, unaware of what's happening around them. After draining the water, Alice would enter Bumby's office, triggering a flashback. Here, Alice finds Bumby's journal and flips through it. We learn about the past of Bumby, something he hinted at earlier. We get flashes of his childhood underneath an abusive father. A father that dished out abuse at him and his mother, Bumby cleaning the bloody floors. A home full of dead animals and tools of a taxidermist. Quote, the design Bible provides an explanation, but not an excuse, for the existence of Bumby's evil. I'm going to come back to that later on. Alice then finds herself face to face again with Bumby in the form of the dollmaker, before returning to the present back in the flooded, burning London. Continuing through London to find the other valves, Alice follows her inner compass, taking her to Radcliffe's office. This time, she's ready to see, process, and learn what she couldn't before. On the desk is Radcliffe's little black book, one we saw him waving around earlier. As she reaches for it, a form of chaos emerges, but Alice does not flinch as the chaos fades away. What the little black book contains shakes Alice to her core. Pages of children, their names, their monetary worth, the name of the buyers, each child assigned a number. Radcliffe had a part in the trafficking of children alongside Bumby. As she reads Radcliffe's little black book, numbered dolls surround her, but scurry away to hide as Alice approaches them. A game of hide and seek would play out. As Alice finds each child, they fade to dust. They are familiar children to Alice, those from the home for wayward youth. After she finds all the children, the shadow of Alice emerges. Instead of fighting, they speak to one another. The shadow seeks the death of Radcliffe, but Alice pleads with her not to. She walks the same path as Bumby and will succumb to darkness and chaos should she kill Radcliffe. Shadow becomes enraged as the scene fades out, telling Alice that Radcliffe dies before leaving her. Alice returns to the Carpenter, only to find him consumed by chaos and now a giant. Joining him is the Walrus, also now a giant and consumed by chaos. To defeat the duo, Alice would have to let them destroy the city around them as they pursue her, till there's nothing left for them to stand on. Mourning the death of yet another friend, Alice returns to Hatter's workshop through the Hall of Doors. There's little time left before the chaos will consume everything. Hatter reaches for the clockwork heart within the rabbit doll of Alice, but she refuses to give it up. Her heart alone is more than enough for what lies ahead. They're out of time, but Hatter shoots Alice and Rabbit through the open roof as the chaos consumes Hatter, marking the end of level 6. Alice and her rabbit doll now find herself on the roof of Hatter's lab. Shadow and chaos consume Wonderland as far as the eye can see. Along with Alice and Rabbit, the Hatters send up a sarcophagus, which opens before them. In lies the Jabberwock.
Selfish, misbegotten, and unnatural child. You smelled the smoke, but you were in dreamland taking tea with your friends. You couldn't be bothered. Your room was protected and spared, while your family upstairs roasted in an inferno of incredible horror.
As he emerges, he knocks Alice to the ground and grabs the rabbit doll. The Jabberwock asks Alice what good is a heart when it can be so easily broken. He tears the heart out of the rabbit and eats both the heart and rabbit. In a rage, Alice begins a boss battle with the Jabberwock in a rematch from the first game. As the fight progresses, chaos begins to overtake the Jabberwock. On his dying breaths, the Jabberwock taunts Alice, telling her that it's too late, to look around her, that she's once again failed. Alice cuts his words short with a vorpal blade to his skull. Jabberwock turns to ash and blows away. Amongst the pile of ash is Rabbit. He is hurt, but still alive as he hugs Alice back. As chaos engulfs the rooftop, Alice and Rabbit hold hands as ash turns to snowflakes. The scene around them shifts into a white light, the voice uttering, "Welcome home." Alice awakens in what is the final scene in the slumber realm. She finds herself in the same place where the game began, the snow-covered countryside with her family home in the distance. This time, there's no moon watching above her. Chaos engulfs the land. It's followed Alice here. As she makes her way toward her family home in the distance, she finds the mushroom where Caterpillar would sit in their earlier talks, but nowhere to be found. Instead, the Queen of Heart emerges to fight Alice in a boss fight, one with far more tricks up her sleeve than the version we fought earlier in the game. As Alice moves in to finish her off, the Queen tells her to stop as she smiles. The Queen of Heart's skin peels away. Emerging is a woman clad in red robes. It's a memory of Alice's mother, Leanne. Alice thinks it's a trick, but it's not. She's held on to the memories of Hatter for safekeeping, for when the time is right. She gives Alice the memories of Hatter. Her mother talks to her, that they locked this side away of her to protect her, and to prepare her for when she was ready. Alice's other part, her shadow, drew strength from anger to overcome and seek justice. Now her shadow is infected by the darkness she sought to destroy. Alice sees a new memory of her shadow self, holding Radcliffe at knife point. It's up to Alice to stop her shadow self, to save herself. Finding herself inside the family home, another voice speaks from the shadows. She sees her father Arthur emerging from the peeling skin of Caterpillar. Alice embraces her parents, who tell her that they are proud of her. Cue players choking up if they're not already doing so. Of course, there is one missing family member, but don't worry, we'll get there in due time. Alice grabs a slice of cake on the table and eats it as chaos engulfs the house. She grows and shatters through the confines. She looks back to see her parents smiling as the shadow engulfs them as the level ends. Level 8 begins with Alice emerging from a shattered glass snow globe, finding herself back in the Hatter's lab. As she awakens, a garden forms, with Hatter offering Alice tea. He's acting like his mad self now, which calms after Alice gives him back his mind and memories that her mother was holding on to. As Alice and Hatter talk, a dark blade pierces Hatter from behind. He falls to the ground, consumed by shadow. Alice once again finds herself face to face with her shadow self. The shadow wishes to destroy all, but Alice refuses to fight. Shadow gives her only two options: join her in darkness or die in it as she attacks Alice. At long last, we have a boss fight with Alice's shadow. Not only a battle with weapons, but a war of words. Alice defeats her shadow, or it appears to be that way, as she impales her with the vorpal blade. Alice is in shock of what she's done. Shadow tells her that she can't let her go and is just as guilty for her death. That she binds you to me. That being her older sister Lizzie. The shadow absorbs Alice, leaving only the shadow self behind. The two are now one, with the shadow side winning. We would then play for Stretch as Shadow Alice, who finds herself in Wonderland corrupted by darkness and shadow. The vorpal blade morphs into Umbral Scythe. Shadow Alice has incredible power, mowing down anything and everything in her path. She makes her way through Wonderland, cutting down those who have helped Alice in the past. Mock Turtle, Bill McGill, Queen of Hearts, the Hatter, Cheshire. Some will beg for their lives, some try to reason, some will fight back, but all will fall against Shadow Alice. The more death she causes, Wonderland falls deeper into darkness. She continues her destruction until only her and Rabbit remain. Shadow Alice uses her vorpal blade to pierce Rabbit. To twist the knife further, no pun intended once again, this is a player input as opposed to a cutscene action. At long last, no light remains, leaving only darkness. And what follows is 60 seconds of complete darkness. Now there would be a few flickers of light and dust on screen, so the player doesn't think the game crashed or fully ended. But Alice Asylum? Not over yet. Level 9 begins with Alice's inner child walking through the void, frozen in time. She herself is a source of light. She comes across silhouettes of her friends and family frozen in time. Tortured expressions. Alice begins to cry, wondering how the shadow defeated her. A voice from behind Alice speaks, telling Alice the shadow won because she still holds on to her, and that she needs to let go. Emerging from a broken pocket watch is Alice's older sister, Lizzie. The two embrace as Lizzie tells Alice it was never her fault. It was his, and only his, that being Bumby. As they embrace, an apparition of Bumby emerges from the shadow. Both Alice and Lizzie stand their ground as they fight Bumby. Now it's not clear if Lizzie would join in on this fight or if she's watching Alice. Bumby would shift through many forms, becoming Alice's guilt manifest. In this fight, Alice's vorpal blade is made of light. Defeating the guilt manifest, Lizzie tells Alice that if she ever wants to visit her, she's always within her. They all are. Never closed, never locked. A single tear drops from Alice's eye, which turns to light as we move on to level 10. I'm sure many a player would be dropping several tears during this scene. We zoom out to see Shadow Alice, all alone in the darkness. The other side of Alice is speaking. Guilt can die, but you cannot kill curiosity. Butterflies emerge from the darkness along with a garden. The scene pans out to have the two Alices sitting at a table, having a tea party. They come to an understanding with one another. The shadow side asks if more darkness awaits them, to which Alice responds, then we'll face that too. Together, we're no strangers to it. The darkness and shadows begin to leave Wonderland, returning to its prior lush state. The shadow asks, do we persist, overcome and learn, and help those who also suffer? Or do we choose to inflict and pass that same darkness onto others? To which Alice responds, let's find out. They link hands and the two become one. Alice finishes her tea as we snap back to reality. We find ourselves back in Ratcliffe's home with Alice cornering Ratcliffe. She's waving her vorpal blade around in one hand, Ratcliffe's little black book in the other. He must pay for his actions. Ratcliffe asks Angela, a young girl marked with the number 13, to shut the door. Ratcliffe slams Alice's toy rabbit down the desk in front of him. He tells Alice to reconsider her actions. He's but a simple businessman. His trafficking of children has been beyond lucrative. He's taken care of her family's estate until she's ready, but he tells her she's insane, unfit for such responsibility. That estate will never be hers. He pulls a gun on Alice, deciding it's time to deal with her once and for all. He asks Alice for any final words. Unflinching, Alice asks, "You've all looked at what's in my mind for so long. I wonder, what's in yours?" Alice, in full control of her darkness, knocks Ratcliffe to the ground, turning his gun into a butterfly. She asks Ratcliffe how his demons are, and that they should visit them together. The final level finds Alice within Ratcliffe's Otherland. The idea of Otherlands, of Alice entering the mind of others, is something the two short films in Alice Otherlands explored. Descending into a spiraling vortex, we see memories of heinous deeds fly by. Manifestations of greed, envy, and wrath chew away at Ratcliffe as they fall further into Ratcliffe's Otherland. Alice would fight his inner demons like blind justice as enemies. This section would end off with fighting the core of Ratcliffe, the Mask of Greed. Upon defeating the core of Ratcliffe, his darkness eats him alive. Alice leaves his Otherland, leaving him to be consumed by his own demons. Returning to reality, Ratcliffe is frothing at the mouth, now gone mad. His glasses fall to the ground, which Alice crushes beneath her boot. Probably as satisfying as crushing the executioner under her boot in Madness Returns. Police arrive. They found the evidence from Ratcliffe's little black book matches up. They take him away, with one officer saying some time at Rutledge Asylum would do him well as he screams. Walking through Ratcliffe's house, Alice comes across a picture of Angela, the young girl who was in the room earlier with Alice and Ratcliffe. Alice hears someone humming a tune familiar to her, one she has heard back in Wonderland. Alice comes across Angela, clutching Alice's rabbit doll. Humming the tune as policemen console her. Angela has no place to go. Alice asks Angela where she would like to go and suggests asking Rabbit. After talking with Rabbit, Angela responds with, "He thinks we should follow you now." They hold hands as the scene ends and credits roll. But we're not quite done. There's more after the credits. Alice, in a dress similar to one her mother wore, walks through the gates of an estate in the English countryside. On the plaque to the gate reads, "Liddell's Home for Wayward Children." She's putting that estate of hers that Ratcliffe tried to wrestle away from her to good use. She's sworn by the children, happy to see her. They're happy, well-fed, content. Angela, clutching onto Rabbit, asks Alice if there will be time for a tea party, to which Alice responds, always. In her excitement, Angela drops Rabbit as the two walk away. After a time, Rabbit blinks, gets up, and runs after them. There is a short description of Alice's outfit here in the design Bible, the headmaster dress, for further closure. We leave Alice Liddell complete and happy. Overcoming all obstacles in her way, Alice dons a dress similar to her mother's and proudly guides those who cannot yet protect themselves. Simply wonderful. I couldn't put it any better myself. But, hold up, we're still not done. On that note of those who cannot yet protect themselves, it's not clear if the following is a secret ending that requires meeting certain criteria to unlock, or if the player gets regardless. The scene opens on an English manor in a dark and stormy night. Inside is a wealthy lord devouring his dinner. He calls to a boy named Edward for more wine, but Edward never answers. Heading to his room in a fury, we find that Edward isn't alone. Inside the room with him are inhabitants of Wonderland and Alice herself. She's holding Radcliffe's little black book. She asks the man if he's the proud owner of number 124. She crosses a line off the page, one of many others. Alice tells the man that it's time for him to look at his true self from within. Alice, in total control of her shadow self, enters the man's mind as shadowy tendrils enter his eyes, mouth, nose, and ears. He's getting the same treatment that Radcliffe did. As the scene fades out, we hear the young boy Edward laughing as he sings, dances, and plays with his new friends. The description for Alice's outfit here, the eclipse dress, gives more context. Alice is in full control of her darkness, a balance of light and dark, completing a harmonious balance of self. Now in pursuit of those who would hurt others, Alice readily positions herself between the abuser and the abused. And with that, at long last, Alice Asylum ends. So, that's quite the journey Alice goes through, is it not? Full of twists and turns, subs and payoffs, a boatload of catharsis with a fairy tale ending. Well, to an extent. Alice will always carry that loss with her, but she's able to live with it and accept it. She's protecting those who are not yet able to protect themselves and seeking justice against the wicked. There were a few key plot moments I want to revisit here to give some more thoughts on. Starting with the main conflicting force, Alice and her shadow self. As seen in a flashback in the second level, a young Alice, the child self, splits from the shadow early on in Rutledge Asylum. The child self of Alice finds herself in the circus, the shadow the dominant personality, the one we've played in the first two games. So are we playing as a different Alice in Asylum? Well, somewhat. We're playing as the child self, but it's not like this is a whole other Alice. They are one and the same, two halves that form a whole. A part locked up until the time is right. And depending on execution, this could take away from some of the impact of the first two games. That notion and revelation we played as Shadow Alice as the dominant personality in those two titles. I don't foresee that becoming an issue, but it is a possibility. It was clear to me reading through the design Bible what was going on with her shadow and child self. Add in the interactive elements of a video game, and I'm sure it would be clear as day. And looking at the track record of the prior two games, I don't see it being a major sticking point, but still it's something to make note of. Another scene I want to bring up again was getting a flashback of Bumby's childhood past, the abusive childhood he suffered from under his father. The Design Bible mentions it provides an explanation, but not an excuse, for the existence of Bumby's evil. Now this is one of those situations where you walk a delicate line. The writing needs to be on point, if not, it can come across a bit as forced, in poor taste, or hacky. Bringing up Bloober Team again, their game The Medium had a perfect example of this. Diving into a heinous character's past of their childhood came across as a bit forced and in poor taste. Sometimes it's far better to leave it open-ended for the player to wonder their backstory. Would it be better off for the player to learn Bumby's past or leave it up to the player? Relieving their past can add more context and enhance the story's themes, but could also take away from it. It all depends on the execution. Again, I'll give Alice Asylum the benefit of the doubt here, looking at how well the past two games handles its dark themes and subject matter. It tackles themes that most games shy away from, and for good reason. Another area I want to touch on is Alice and the battle for her soul, the battle against her shadow self. That if she kills Radcliffe, the shadow and chaos will consume her and all is lost. This does evoke one of those age-old tropes of, if you kill them, you'll be as bad as them. One that can be infuriating if handled by poor writing, or it could come out of nowhere at the story's conclusion. I don't see this being an issue for Alice Asylum, but one I want to note. After all, the game would establish these stakes early on. What the consequences will be should Alice go through with killing Radcliffe, what it means for her shadow self. Besides, it's not like Radcliffe gets off scot-free. In fact, death would be too kind for him with his involvement of the trafficking of children. Here he gets a fate worse than death for what Alice shows him within his mind. Much more fitting punishment. A potential main issue that popped to mind while reading through the Design Bible was the pacing of the ending. What happens from about the shadow consuming Alice and onward? Yes, it's very much a well-earned victory lap with plenty of catharsis. But if the pacing was off, it could result in what I like to call Return of the King film ending syndrome, where it seemed like things were going to wrap up only for it to continue several times over. Then again, I think these final levels are far shorter than earlier game stretches, but with the pacing issues that Madness Returns suffered from, I do have some concern this could be a possibility for Alice Asylum. I also had some interesting images pop in my mind while reading through the ending stretch and the design bible as a whole. All this talk about light and darkness and shadows and chaos, it brought a certain series to mind.
Forget it. There's no way you're taking Harry's heart.
As I brought up earlier, it's not clear in the fight against Alice's guilt manifest, where she fights Bumby with Lizzie, if Lizzie would be helping her or watching. It brought to mind the ending of Kingdom Hearts 2 with Sora and Riku flying all over the place during the final boss. That said, it could be very much a hell yeah kind of moment if Lizzie joined in on that fight. And one final note is on Alice herself. She's now like some unstoppable force with untold powers, having the ability to enter the other lands, the mind of others. That during the day, she's this kind headmaster of the Liddell's Home for Wayward Children, guiding those that cannot yet protect themselves. But at night, she's working her way through Ratcliffe's little black book, a vigilante of the night. Those taking part in heinous crimes, she enters their other lands, showing them their inner demons. Which is kind of awesome. But I could see it also being a bit too much. It's a bit unclear in the design bible if the vigilante bit is a secret ending that requires certain criteria to unlock. It makes for a nice little addition to dedicated players, but I could see it taking away from the default ending it was part of. Again, it's that Return of the King film ending syndrome popping up. On the note of canon, this ending does call into question the canon of the Otherland short films, where Alice works at the Royal Opera House after the events of Madness Returns. Don't think she needs to work there after the events of Alice Asylum. After all, she's running a home for wayward youth and doling out vengeance at night, and she's in possession of her family's estate. But in conclusion, Alice Asylum wraps up the series in a satisfying manner. The journey of Alice coming to terms with all she's been through, dealing with her shadow self, the returning faces she comes across along the way, the setups, the payoffs, the growth of her character, the cathartic nature of the ending stretch of what she overcomes. If the execution was up to par, this game would have been a slam dunk on the narrative front. It's clear as day working through the design bible how much love, care, and heart they put into Asylum, which of course makes EA's decision an utter heartbreaker.
This unmitigated disaster is your doing, and it will get worse.
The design bible that you see here, labeled as version 1.0, released in February of 2023. After its release, American McGee and his team resumed talks with EA. With the design bible and a production plan in hand, they laid out a budget, a schedule, team, and design plan for Alice Asylum. Spicy Horse, the studio founded by American that developed Madness Returns, closed in 2016. The game design, narrative, and art direction was done under another company American formed, Mysterious Studios. For a potential game development partner, Virtuos expressed strong interest as a collaborative partner. Virtuos is a company that specializes as an external developer in working with other studios. Recent works include the Oblivion remaster and the upcoming Snake Eater remake. They were looking to have either EA fund the project or license out the IP. In April of 2023, American announced EA passed on the project, both for funding and licensing out the IP. For funding, they, quote, have ultimately decided to pass on the project based on an internal analysis of the IP, market conditions, and details of the production proposal. On the licensing end, Alice is an important part of EA's overall game catalog, and selling or licensing isn't something they're prepared to do right now. With all options exhausted, American decided to retire from game development. So let's take a look at these reasonings EA gave. First, on the refusal of funding Alice Asylum. When they decided to pass on the project based on an internal analysis of the IP, market conditions, and details of the production proposal. While the series has a devoted audience, it's never done huge sales numbers. First game has sold around 1.5 million copies. I couldn't find any concrete numbers for Madness Returns, but it sold little at launch. That said, it's one of those long-tail games that continues to sell over the years. Still, this is EA we're talking about. They love their live services and their microtransactions. Their live services and other segment accounted for around 73% of the company's revenue in 2024, the other 27% falling under the full game category. Live services and other is a bit vague. That would include elements like subscriptions and microtransactions. EA made around $1 billion in revenue on microtransactions in the fourth quarter of 2019. I couldn't find more concrete numbers for more recent years, but no doubt it's only grown. The design bible for Alice Asylum brings up the possibility for DLC, new levels, cosmetic content like more outfits, but this would still be a drop in the ocean of what kind of EA generates with their Ultimate Team modes and their sports games, where all you need is a small number of whales to generate a bulk of the revenue. That said, EA still has single-player experiences that do well for them, like the Star Wars Jedi titles. To be fair, that's the Star Wars brand we're talking about. Despite how great of a job Disney has done in torpedoing Star Wars as a brand over the last decade, it still brings in money. The Star Wars Jedi titles have exceeded sales expectations for EA. So it's not like EA won't do single-player experiences, but they would want to see high sales numbers that the past 2 titles didn't quite hit for the series. On the details of the production proposal, they were asking for around a development budget of $50 million. Far larger budget compared to Madness Returns, which is around $9 million, one of the many possible sticking points for passing on the project. Still, that's but a fraction for what EA spent on other games. BioWare's recent titles having budgets well over $100 million going through multiple reboots, I'm still surprised they haven't shut down BioWare yet. It's rumored that Battlefield 6 has already cost over $400 million to make, and EA is looking for 100 million players. Yes, 100 million. I always have to wonder if one of the decision makers at EA were reading through the design Bible and came across the core of Radcliffe, the Mask of Greed, and that they saw a reflection of themselves. So that covers the funding element from EA's side of things. What about the licensing side of the equation? American did have interested investors outside of EA beyond crowdfunding that expressed interest if they could make an arrangement with EA. But EA refused, saying that Alice is an important part of EA's overall game catalog, and selling or licensing isn't something they're prepared to do right now. This one is far more puzzling. It's not like they've been doing anything with it. American mentioned one possible reason is that EA didn't want to look stupid if they decided not to get behind the project and it became a big success. One of the other reasons that seemed probable was factoring in the TV show. There's a TV adaptation of American McGee's Alice in the works, announced in 2022 with David Hayter attached as the showrunner. Yes, that Solid Snake David Hayter. So if the show did well, there could be merit to EA holding on to the IP to capitalize on it, but there's been not a peep about it since. And according to American McGee, it's because the show is dead. He still pops up here and there on places like Reddit to give insights into Alice Asylum and the series. While I can't verify it, American mentioned being on calls where the producers said the pitch meetings failed. There's been no cancellation announcement as they're trying to save face. He mentioned that the last guy they brought in to pitch wanted to have some time travel involved and set in modern day London. Whether this is David Hayter or someone else, it's not clear. I mean, another TV or movie adaptation of a game that misses the point of the original work? Shocking, I know. Who would have thought? Again, I can't verify these statements from American, but considering there's been not a peep since its announcement, I'll give the benefit of the doubt here. There is also a bit of a misconception of the IP rights due to the name of the first game. American mentions he gets asked on the regular why EA doesn't give him back the IP. Thing is, he's never owned the IP. There's always an IP of EA. They called it American McGee's Alice for trademark purposes. It was something American himself was against, feeling it took away from the team's work. Further adding to the confusion is that the work of Alice in Wonderland is in the public domain. But this version of Alice, its characters, its story, is its own IP. It's EA's IP and always has been. They can do what they want with it. They want to sit on it, that's their call. I wish they would take a page out of Square Enix's book and sell off some of their IPs, or license them out at the very least. It's not like they're really doing anything with it. Let someone else take on the risk of moving forward with it. But again, as American said, you may have decided to hold on to it in case it would become a big success and EA will look bad for not backing it. But whatever the reasons being, it's not happening. American disbanded the team and he's retired from game development. After a few months of radio silence, American McGee released a video on his YouTube channel in the fall of 2023 giving more thoughts on Alice Asylum. He brings up a point in the video that, while controversial, there is a way for fans to experience the game beyond the design Bible. With the rapid progress of AI, it could soon be possible to take that design Bible, feed it into AI, and have it spit out a game. But of course, there's always another option he didn't bring up in the video. If dedicated fans wanted to, they could take the design Bible and bring it to life with a fan-made project. It's all laid out for a group to take a crack at should they wish. And some fans are taking things into their own hands with Alice Asylum. Now, while writing this, I debated how much to bring up about it. When you work on a fan game, you're in a bit of a tricky spot. You want to bring awareness to it. It can be tough to keep that motivation going without support. But of course, you have to be ready for the IP holders to drop a cease and desist. Wooly said it best in his video on fan games.
If you or someone you know is working on a really cool fan game, shut the fuck up about it!
American himself is aware of the fan project, is neutral on it, not wanting to get involved. So to the team out there, tread lightly. Err on the side of caution. I do wish you the best. For those waiting, don't expect anything anytime soon, if at all. The creation of a fan game is always a delicate balancing act for bringing attention, but not too much attention until the time's right. Regardless of what comes of that, we'll always have the Design Bible, an incredible work that lays out for what they had in mind for Alice Asylum. And had they been able to execute on it, what we would have had is something special and a great send-off to the series. But as is, you can look through it and fill in the blanks for yourselves. How would exploration feel, the combat? How would these cutscenes play out on the screen as opposed to the page? Reading through the design bible did bring back memories of reading game magazines, when they were the primary source of information for games, where you had a description of the game and some screenshots. You had to fill in the blanks yourselves with how it would play, how it would appear on a screen until you got it. Cancelled games are such a fascinating thing. Title you look forward to, only for it to never see the light of day. The reasons for cancellation can vary. The studio restarted from scratch, they ditched the project altogether, the studio closed down, and it leaves a lingering of what could have been had it made it to release. Which makes Alice Asylum such a fascinating example of a cancelled game. A crowdfunded design bible iterated over many years with fan feedback. It's such a shame that they weren't able to make something work with EA to turn that vision into reality. Alice deserves a fitting send-off, and Alice Asylum would have been more than up to the task. And while we do have it laid out here before us on the pages, it's a shame it won't make it to the screen. At least one with American McGee and his team at the helm with a large budget backing it. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and your thoughts in the comments below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and do consider checking out the channel Discord. Once again, a big thank you to boot.dev for sponsoring this video. Do check the pinned comment or description for a code for a discount. Special shout out to the Boulder Punchers who give extra support to the channel on Patreon and YouTube memberships. For those in the complete, global saturation tier, American Boot and Flan Nagel. For those in the thank you for your patronage tier, Tom Terrible. For those in the now this is Boulder punching tier, Ethan, the Madman in Waco, the original Nartze's Diet Thick Dew TM Neo Edition. For those in the Jill Sandwich tier, Angel, Benji, Benny Winterdawn, BBF in Bloxburg, Dark Rod 99, Extraordinary 2, Happy Tunes, Logan Lepin, Mad Morpheus Gaming, Michael Walters, Nico Pero, Sam Jones, Squid Vicious, Will Han, and Zin. And now for the post-video Q&A. Those in the Jill Sandwich tier and above can ask questions for this. Flan Niggle. You get to have dinner with any game creator, who and why? It's always hard to narrow it down to just one. When I was trying to come up with a list, it made me think of this person who is related to this person, which made me think of this individual. Let's go through a few of them. So of course related to this video, since being related to the Alice series, American McGee would be really interesting to sit down with and hear more about his experiences of trying to get Alice Asylum off the ground with EA. I'd also love to hear more of his days back when he worked at id, and more for that id connection. I'd love to also have dinner with John Carmack. He's such a fascinating dude. I've seen those QuakeCon talks where he talks for hours, and I have most of it, more than most of it, goes completely over my head. But he has just such a way about him in speaking. It'd be really interesting to hear about those stories. For including composers in this list, I'd love to have dinner with Nobu Uematsu from the Final Fantasy series, Kira Yamaoka from Silent Hill, Rick Schaefer, who did the soundtrack for Vampire Bloodlines, which I consider one of the best around, would be great to sit down with and relate to Bloodlines, because I've had it in my mind thinking about Bloodlines 2 coming out soon. I'd love to chat with Brian Mitsoda and Chris Avallone. Brian was the main writer of the first game and was leading the earlier version of Bloodlines 2 before being fired, and they canceled that version. Chris Avallone, he's worked on a bunch of stuff, but he was also working on that project that got scrapped and fired when he had those false allegations against him. So I'd also love to just hear their stories of working in the industry and hearing more about what went wrong with Vampire Bloodlines 2, at least the version they were working on. I have a morbid curiosity to see how the released version from the Chinese room will be. But related also to Chris Avallone, as I know he's working at Wolf Eye Studios now, who is founded by Arcane's founder, Rafael Colantonio. He'd be cool to talk with, since I really love the immersive sims. Of course, related to immersive sims, I'd like to sit down with someone like a Warren Spector. It'd be really cool to talk with. More related on the horror side, of course, with Resident Evil, people, Shinji Mikami, Hideki Kamiya. More on the oddball wildcard developers, Swery65 and Suda51. It'd be quite interesting to talk with. I know they're working on a collaboration together, which I think comes out quite soon in the fall. Of course, Miyazaki from Dark Souls. But I'd have to have a few criteria. We'd have to have dinner in the proximity of a swamp. I also think when I go for a handshake with him, I do like a delayed handshake, kind of mimicking the delayed attacks the series has become over-reliant on. I also have a fascination in sitting down with what I call some of the more used car salesman types. Peter Molyneux, Chris Roberts, especially Chris Roberts with how much money they've received for Star Citizen. Just seeing why, I'm probably like, oh, I can understand why people fall under your spell and listen to your embellishments and exaggerations. I also have like a fascination with sitting down with those who design games that I wholeheartedly disagree with their approach. David Cage would be a perfect example of that. I'd also love to talk to people who've worked on other train wrecks. I'm working on an upcoming video on Limbo of the Lost, which is a very notorious point-and-click game from the mid-2000s that childless plagiarism. I'd really love to sit down with a team over that one, talk to them about the plagiarism element, how long it took for the development, because it took well over a decade, I think, for them to make it on and off. I guess you could consider it under the game developer, game creator, but Gabe Newell as well. Of course, we'd have to meet on one of his many yachts. That would be a nice way to spend some time. So yeah, that's a bit of a list of people. That's by no means all of them, but there would be definitely more. But thanks for the question, Flatnagel. It's a very interesting one. I'm curious to hear what kind of dinners people, and if you're still listening to this, in the comments below, who you'd like to have dinner with. So Happy Tunes asks, what's the difference between a boulder and a rock? I've been searching an answer for the past 26 years. You know, it's a great question. It's like, at what point does a walk turn into a hike? At what point does a boulder become a rock? And I guess the technical is, well, I think it's when its diameter is larger than 25 centimeters. You know, all boulders are rocks, but not all rocks are boulders. I also like to think it could be more in the eye of the beholder. You know, a rock becomes a boulder for someone when it's too big to carry, so you could punch your way through it. So it's going to depend on your strength and size. But thanks for the question, Happy Tunes. So if you want to receive early access to videos, be featured in the credits, periodic updates, and more, do consider joining as a Patreon or YouTube member. Or if not monthly, supporting the channel with a one-time donation through Ko-fi or a super thanks. Check the pinned comment and description if you're interested. If you're looking for further videos to watch in line with Alice Asylum, I'd recommend checking out my video on the Alice series, where I cover the first two titles along with other odds and ends related to the series. I did briefly touch upon Alice Asylum in that video before the whole cancellation, but that's one I'd recommend. So thanks again, and I will see you in the next video.
The world is upside down, Alice. Inmates run the asylum. No thanks. And worst of all, I'm left tealess.